All right, welcome everybody to the creator economy, from TikTok stars to business leaders. My name is Max Green. I'm a 2020 grad from the University of Oregon, currently a senior finance and strategy analyst at Intel. I also serve on the PDX Duck chapter alumni group as the career networking chair. This chapter has partnered with the Ducks Career Network to build out a series of skill sharing workshops led by UO alumni. And I'm happy to introduce this evening's alumni panelist. I mean, if you've ever wondered what it takes to be big in content creation and social media entrepreneurship, you might turn to Adam Ferris and Connor Bussey. Their TikTok videos have drawn more than 2 million followers across several accounts, averaging about 65 million per month on TikTok alone. Let that sit in. That's crazy. That's a lot of people. They focus on showcasing luxury lifestyles in major cities across the US. Think cars, yachts, mansions, and sports. And since launching in January 2021, so very recently, they've worked with iconic brands such as Road and Track, Sports Illustrated, the Seattle Seahawks, and global brands like eToro, amongst others. That's impressive. This evening, they'll discuss their early beginnings in startups and their path to become where they are today, to scale into a social media side hustle into a successful business. Before we begin our discussion with Adam and Connor, here's a quick peek at a video at their sports channel.
LeBron James's agent was a 21-year-old selling jerseys out of the trunk of his car when he first met LeBron. Rich Paul is one of the most influential people in sports today. But when Paul was 21 years old, he met LeBron for the first time, who was still in high school. They first met at the airport in their hometown of Akron, Ohio. Paul had not gone to college and was trying to get his throwback jersey business off the ground when he first ran into LeBron. According to the New York Times, James was captivated by Paul's Warren Moon throwback jersey and asked where he got it. It turned out that Paul was selling jerseys out of the trunk of his car and was actually going to Atlanta to buy more. He gave James his connection in Atlanta, and Paul told him to drop his name for a discount, and they went on their way. In an interview, Rich Paul said, "It was fate. I could have missed a plane. I could have taken an earlier flight. I could have not worn the jersey. I could have been having a bad day and not spoken to him." The two became friends, and after LeBron got picked #1 overall in the now legendary 2003 NBA draft, he hired Paul on a $50,000 annual salary. Over the years, Paul learned more and more about the ins and outs of the sports business and went from LeBron's glorified personal assistant to his full-time agent. He now represents a handful of NBA players, runs an agency called Clutch Sports Group, is a serial entrepreneur, and one of the most notable sports agents of all time. By the way, he now has a net worth of over $100 million.
So that's a little example of their work. Very cool. And also, before we jump in, if there's any questions for the audience, please put it in the Q&A box. I think we have about 5 topics with some questions to go over with Adam and Connor, and I'll be looking at the Q&A box, and we can stop in between if there's like some question that people are dying to ask. And then also at the end, we'll have like roughly 10 minutes or so to ask questions. So let's dive in. I appreciate the time, Adam and Connor. So I guess my first question is, can you give like a little background about yourselves? What you majored in at school, when you graduated, just some of that origin story.
Definitely. Yeah, Connor, want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I majored in business with a focus in finance, marketing, and entrepreneurship, and a minor in economics. So I graduated back in 2019, before all the COVID craze. And then when I came out of college, I worked downtown Portland. It was a kind of cool position because it was owned by these 2 guys, and one part of the business was a high-end marketing design firm. So I was the director of finance there. And then the other half was a family office. And so we invested in startups, and we helped them scale and raise money and such. So both very helpful for later starting a scaling marketing company.
Definitely. And I'm Adam. Also, thanks for having us, Max and Megan. Really appreciate you having us here. So my name's Adam. I grew up just outside of Portland my entire life. Both my parents went to University of Oregon, and naturally I followed them. And so I have absolutely no regrets. I was actually a general social science major with a focus in business. So graduated 2020, and I guess following school, which we'll dive into a little bit, I was first at a B2B company in the Bay Area. I was a growth marketer, and they were a sort of a software energy management company. And I always say it kind of first laid the groundwork for content, but in what they're doing is really important. It was just so boring. So yeah, full disclosure there. But yeah, again, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I mean, I kind of want to talk about just, further for me, when I hear content marketing, I know there's this whole wave of influencers and it's like a whole new business and people are just like, how do I get into that? They're making a lot of money and all that such. Can we just speak about just what do you guys do, like in layman terms and just like general, what does your business do? What do you guys do? And kind of examples of your work. I know we did a little bit in the preview, but can we explain that? Like, what is that?
Our parents asked us the same question. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely a very common question. So yeah, so basically what we do, it's kind of a two-pronged model. So one side of our business is that media company where we run several channels, have a couple million followers across YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and all of that. And that we work with brands there to promote companies, to promote products. And then we also, get ad revenue and stuff like that. So that's kind of one side of the business. And then the other side, which kind of grew because of that side, would be the marketing agency side. So that is where we work with brands such as Sports Illustrated, Bleacher Report, and companies like that to either hop on a call once a week to talk strategy, all the way up to fully running accounts for them, creating content, managing influencers, all that kind of stuff. Really just anything in the social media marketing space. And really focused on short form video. And Adam, I don't know if you want to dive in on a couple examples there, like SI, but.
Yeah, no, you really summed it up well. I guess going back to kind of even before we first sort of incorporated into an actual business was, Sports Illustrated just kind of reached out. That's probably one of our, actually, I think it was the first time that's ever happened. And he kind of, the head of social kind of reached out and said, hey, we see TikTok's this really emerging platform. We see kind of what you're doing in the sports space. We've got this cool sort of franchise. So a lot of media companies kind of have these offshoots of their main company, like Overtime has Overtime Kicks, Overtime, Hoops, whatever, basketball, football, Bleacher Report has BR Gridiron. And so with Sports Illustrated, they have like, where are they now? And so that's kind of what I really dove into, is like what happened to certain athletes at their peak. Maybe people want to know what happened to Jeremy Lin, or people want to know what happened to D'Anthony Thomas. Go Ducks, one of my favorite players of all time. So yeah, we really just kind of took that initial model with what we had with Sports Illustrated first. And when companies started reaching out and said, hey, let's sort of like replicate this. This seems to be working really well. And we can kind of scale from there. Yeah,
especially in those spaces that, Max touched on, especially real estate, automotive, and sports spaces, just that our accounts are most focused on. So we just kind of help companies in those industries the most.
Absolutely. And I mean, and I know this is a little background because we've talked, offline where you guys have moved, but where'd you guys originally start the business? And then where are you guys currently right now? And why did you do that change?
Yeah, so we started the business. We're both born and raised in Portland. Went back to Portland after we graduated. But we've always wanted to kind of move somewhere. We like the big city feel. So we ended up moving to New York City. Now we live and are currently in downtown Manhattan. And yeah, we just got here a couple of weeks ago and are loving it. Really kind of brought on because all of these big media companies are here in New York, and we, 90% of the brands we're working with were here anyway. It just made sense. So it helps with networking, which we'll get into later, I'm sure.
And don't be fooled. We were very fortunate to get an awesome place, but Connor's literally right above me. So full disclosure there.
So if you hear the echo, that's the reason. If it's
yeah, exactly.
And I think this is a great little background to, how you got here, and we'll talk about that journey and how you became successful. I'm actually going to do kind of a step back a little bit. I noticed, in business school and undergrad, we don't really talk about failures. You've had this incredible fast success and it's growing, and it's unbelievable. Can we talk about, what were some of like maybe the setbacks that you got along the way, and the lessons learned from that? I imagine there's people in the audience, they see you too, they're like, damn, this is like 2 years you guys were back at school, or 3 years you're back at school. Was it just that easy? Can you talk about maybe some of the setbacks and lessons learned to get to the point where you're at right now?
Yeah. Go for it, Adam.
Yeah, it's definitely been a bumpy path. Like I said, it really started, content creation really started as just a side hustle. And I feel like that is the case for a lot of people, a lot of creators. It's kind of how it starts. And I was working that, growth marketing job, not really having a good time there. But Connor and I go, way back to college. We've worked on a multitude of projects together, even companies. And, I'm not going to dive too deep into those, but yeah, they definitely didn't really work out, whether it was, an app or whether it was whatever we were working on really. And, I don't want to sound super cliche, but we don't really like try to look at those as failures, because you're totally right. It's like every single thing that we've experienced has, one, led us to this point, but two, we've brought along with us, those golden nuggets of information that, whether it's people that we met along the way, which we'll dive into networking a little bit, whether it was, just a really valuable experience or piece of information that we can then kind of apply to ourselves now and just be like, hey, this is kind of how we've almost been in this situation before. Maybe we don't go this way, maybe we go that way, because we've done this route before and it maybe didn't work out. So yeah, we've learned a lot. And I feel like the past 2-3 years, what you mentioned, Max, has been like way longer than that. But yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say it didn't feel fast because we've been working together on a lot of things for a long time. But yeah, I completely agree. I mean, if we had this opportunity now that we have now 2 years ago, we just wouldn't be able to capitalize on it like we are now. So I think, it worked out, and everything we learned is kind of merged into this, not like fail, start over, fail, start over. It's more of a merge into where we are now. So
Definitely.
Yeah. And I think that's a valuable lesson to students, is like, it's never going to be a straight line. I know that everyone hears that cliche, as it's kind of steps, where you have some setbacks, you learn something from the past, you take something from a current job, and it all morphs into where you are today. It's all those lessons. And, I see Connor has the hat on for UL, so I kind of wanted to dive in a little bit about that. And my bad, Adam, my bad. I saw that too. Okay, that's my fault. I just see the big O. But I wanted to talk about kind of the UO journey, lessons there as well. I'm assuming that's where you guys met, and just talking about that kind of from the start, maybe from freshman year to senior year, and kind of that progression as well.
yeah, I mean, the U of O obviously played a huge part in what we've been able to do. Like you said, Adam and I met there, which was important to where we're at now, but also, we met just a ton of other people, and you have opportunities in college that you don't really after sometimes, just in terms of, again, networking, where people want to help college students and people want to network with college students because it's more of a learning experience. When you reach out to someone and say, I'm a student at the U of O, I'm curious, people love to help that. And they know that you're not there trying to sell them something. You're not there trying to, you're just there to learn. And it allows you to build a lot deeper connection with people, so that when we came out of college, we already had people that were ready for us to come out of college. And, I didn't get jobs from applying to them. I got jobs because I already knew the people. So I think just having that mindset that it's really about learning stuff, nobody, it's not all about the GPA necessarily. It's about all of these awesome opportunities through the business school personally, but whatever you're interested in, that you can start things. We founded the blockchain group. I mean, it was a huge opportunity for us to learn how to build something first, without having a ton of our own money on the line or anything. It taught us how to build stuff. So very valuable.
Yeah. And I would just add that, maybe there's some creator or some creatives that are like, in the audience and watching, can maybe relate to this, but I was never really like good at school, to be completely honest with you. And, but I always took advantage of a lot of extracurricular opportunities. I was always super curious and super motivated to keep learning, to keep networking, even if like that didn't show in school, in my grades traditionally. And just, I mean, kind of going back to the U of O, there's so many opportunities to meet with alumni, to what Connor said, to start a group or get involved in a group. And that 100% laid the groundwork to like what we do and who we are now. No question. I think Connor would agree. And, whereas not to, boost your ego a little bit, Connor, but Connor's really good at school. And so, but we definitely aligned on one kind of, we definitely aligned on like just the desire to work hard and be ambitious and be curious. Like that's one of the biggest things, is be curious about anything and then just go try it, like that's definitely like I did a lot of that in college. It's like, hey, if I want to like venture capital, we were in VC for a little bit, blockchain, we were curious about that. We just wanted to try things, and that really, really helped us.
I think that's excellent advice. Because I mean, you look at school, right? You're paying a lot of money to go to school. You have this period where you should explore what you want to do. I mean, I think it's pretty rare that most people come in. I mean, when you guys were freshmen, you didn't come in thinking this is where you're at now, right? This, if you would have said you're in New York 3 years later, 2 years later at undergrad, it took a journey of exploration to get to where you are today. And it takes that initiative for students, which is sometimes tough, for sure.
Yeah, and even just U of O, you would be surprised at how many U of O people are across the country in amazing companies, and having that connection. People love to talk. I mean, if you're a duck, you want to talk to other ducks, and that's something that we found so much success with. They are everywhere, and they're in every company. And if you reach out to them and say, "Hey, I'm a duck," or "I'm a duck alum," like, it's awesome. So that's something that was very valuable to us as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've had that from my own personal experience, and it is like a family, and that's it's part of what you're paying for and why you're going to school, and you want to take advantage of it. So I think my next kind of questions, I was looking at the Q&A box, I didn't see any questions just yet, so feel free, if you're in the audience, if you have any questions, come through. I don't remember in the business school that there was any direct social media course. Like, how do you become like what you're doing? Maybe there is some, and we could talk about that. Maybe I'm just not aware of. So where I'm getting at is, like, how did you learn how to run a business day to day? If it wasn't basing off of the coursework that you were doing at school or something else, how did you learn that? I think that's a big mystery for students, where they're like, all right, I'm in school, see Adam and Connor, they're really successful. What do I need to learn ABC that maybe I can try to replicate them, or something like that? Can we speak a little bit about that, kind of that process of trial and error, and what you do to like run a day-to-day business?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of it kind of goes back to, like we said, starting groups from a small level, and then, starting businesses from there, and really just connecting and learning as much as you can from, different networks and different people that you meet. But yeah, it really just comes from doing it and failing, like we kind of said before, because every business is very different, especially social media. There's not really a roadmap, and I don't think I took a social media class in college. I don't think so. I probably, I don't know, but it's definitely more just about being observant, like Adam said, being curious and learning what works and what doesn't. And that's something that we've provided value to brands, is we've tried everything. I think in terms of output, we put out a lot of videos, and we've tried a lot of things that work and a lot of things that don't work. And so we just kind of learned as we went, and that was, the best way to learn for us. So yeah.
I think you hit a spot on. The only thing I would say is just, lots of trial and error. We both, not to sound like a broken record, but we both come from the startup space. So we've seen a lot, we've experienced a lot, and we, just to kind of keep saying that we take little golden nuggets with us, and kind of definitely apply ourselves into now.
And tying it back specifically to social media, I guess the hardest things I would say would be monetizing is obviously difficult, and figuring that out. But again,
right,
you have to figure it out, and it's something people don't think about. They see these influencers and they think, oh, they must be making thousands and millions of dollars. Well, not necessarily, because if someone came to you and said, what are you going to charge for a promotion? I don't know. If you're just starting, you have no idea, right? You have to start somewhere. You have to guess, you have to learn. So without doing it, there's really no way to figure out value, to figure out how to build yourself up. And then the other tough sides of it is that social media is 24/7. If you're going to get into it, there's no weekends, there's no nights. It's just when something needs to go up, it needs to go up. So I would say those are two pretty big challenges that we face, but if you love what you do, it's fun. So.
Yeah. And really quickly, just to kind of piggyback off of that, why I also would say that, when you're like first starting, I mean, not to sound super cliche, not to sound like Gary Vee or anything, but like really the only barrier is you, right? You can start tomorrow and like start growing your audience, and it should like kind of come from within. To what Connor said, like if you're not passionate about it, it first off, if you're not passionate about like your business, like, yeah, you're going to slack off. If you're not passionate about your content, people are going to see that and not resonate with your content, think it's inauthentic, and therefore you're not going to keep growing and retaining that following. So I just think that going back to the passion piece, whether on the business side or the content creation side, is very, very important.
Yes, and if you really want to get into the content space, it's the best, I would say personally, the best side hustle there is out there, because anyone can do it. Start making content, reach out to brands and say, hey, I can make you guys some UGC content for $100, whatever it is. Like, just, you can start anywhere, and then that gives you an engine to keep going. And it's always going to start as a side hustle, like it did for Adam, and then it did for us, and then we turn it into full time. So just get it going as a side hustle, make a couple $100 and see what you can do. So yeah.
That's really good advice. And I'm going to ask an ad hoc question, just kind of piggyback on that last point. When do you know when you're growing your side hustle, you have a job, you're lucky enough to have a job, that you quit your job and you go all in? What was that like, that moment? And if you could talk about that, and who you talked to, and maybe you're talking to your parents, your friends thought you were crazy or something like that, that kind of that pivot point of where you're like, I'm moving to New York, I'm doing this full time. Can you talk about that? I feel like that fear, that pivot point, that period of time, I think holds back a lot of people, because it's that fear, it's that risk.
Yes.
Can we speak a little bit about that?
And I'm so glad you asked that question. And I'm sure Connor is too. So I'll be super transparent. There was a point where the side hustle income was pretty much exceeding my day job. But I was just, to your point, so nervous and just frankly terrified of like, holy crap, this unknown little side hustle, like, is this actually sustainable? Can I do this long term? What does that look like? There were so many questions I had. And, Connor, being the operator he is, was like, hey, here's how we can kind of operationalize. And so I think that's why our relationship is so great, is like, we are very, we have very interdisciplinary skill sets, where like, I'm the creative, that side, but it's scary because you need that person to keep you grounded, like Connor kind of keeps me grounded. Now, yeah, I mean, that's kind of all I have on that topic right now. But it's tricky because it's different for everybody. And I also want to like make it clear that I'm very, very fortunate that I also had super supportive parents, still have super supportive parents. They're amazing. A super supportive network where if things were to fail, I could have been like, hey, could I pick up a shift here? Could I get a job here or whatever, So there were these sort of pillows that I could have kind of fallen back on and been like, hey, if things were to go awry, if things were to go bad, like there's a support system there. And so I think that kind of goes back to your network, and we can talk about networking a little bit, but that all those points really, really help me and Connor really kind of lift off and just go for it full time. So
yeah, I agree. I think it's really a mental thing. You have to be willing to do what it takes to make enough money to just do it full time. And so if you're not passionate about it, I would say that's more of an issue than anything else, because we also found quickly, it may seem obvious, but once you stop working a full-time job and you go all in, you can also bring in a lot more money because you have a lot more time to do it. So, as long as you're really passionate and you're hungry and you're ready to get out there, I think it's the best thing you can do, because like Adam said, of the companies we were working with at the time, we had great relationships with them and we had good networks with them. At the end of the day, if all else had failed, we probably could have gone and worked for one of those companies full time, or gone and worked with the people that we had met through the business anyway. So, you just got to take the leap of faith. And I agree with that. I mean, you have to find a business partner that has a different skill set than you, and most importantly has the same curiosity as you, and that you want to continue to push each other, because it's a lot of hours and it's a lot of stress, but yeah, it's a lot of fun.
He nagged me for weeks. I was like, no.
I know. Yeah. Full transparency, I tried to get him to quit his job like 5 months before he did. So
yeah, seriously, it was a long time.
It's not an easy journey, to get to the point we're at. And I think, you touched on this in this point. This is another kind of ad hoc question, because I saw the Q&A is networking. We'll get into that in the next part. But, I think growing up, for most people, you're somewhat conditioned. You go to school, you come in, you clock in at a certain time, then you get into a corporate job. It's Monday through Friday, you're clocking in 9 to 5. Connor, you talked about that this is 24/7. Can you talk about, maybe the positives of being an entrepreneur and like the freedom that you have? You're not clocking in, clocking in out. And that's, I imagine, a positive side of it. You talked about some of the realities that you're working all the time, but can you talk about like the freedom of being an entrepreneur? That I don't know if there's maybe a fear of that for a lot of people, or just not an understanding because they're used to that timeline that they've been doing since, grade school.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely weird. And a lot of people don't understand it, even in your life where, you have to set aside the time to do what you need to do, but it gives you the flexibility to kind of do it when you want to. And so if you don't have that bank of vacation time, like you're saying, if you want to take time off, you just work extra the day before and then you take the next day off. So it's a lot of that where, yeah, I agree. It's the best. We love the freedom. But yeah, you just have to make sure that you're disciplined enough to get your work done, because you're totally right. Your whole life you go through, like, people are telling you what to do and you get your job done and go home and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I would just say the freedom is the best aspect of it and something that we enjoy. So yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. And you can only experience it if you're an entrepreneur, right? And that's maybe not the only way, but it's one way to do it.
Pretty much freedom. Yeah.
I want to go to the Q&A. I got some questions now, so a little ad hoc. We have one question where when you were an alumnus reaching out to you, what is your realistic bandwidth to follow up with everyone? How often do you follow up? So I think this is more of a question about like a networking. So we're kind of moving over to networking. We talked about that. When you're reaching out and networking with somebody, how often do you follow up with someone? Just general tips in networking. We can dive in a little bit deeper to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, we normally follow up often, but it really just depends on how you want to reach out to people. And there's a lot of things that people do that are not ideal for networking. And so I guess just a couple of do's and don'ts that are kind of important is make sure that you're not reaching out to people pitching yourself or asking for something or doing something like that's not how you network. That's not how you grow a connection, and they're not going to respond. It always has to be more coming at it from, like I said, a curiosity standpoint. Come at it from you're wanting to learn, you genuinely want to connect. And one thing that Adam and I have found that's consistent is people like to talk about themselves. So ask about them, learn about their journey, about their path. You learn something, you get them talking. It's just the best way to connect with people is ask how they got to that job. If it's a job you want, ask them, how do you think you would get there? Get their advice. So I would say those are major parts of networking. And then in terms of how much you want to follow up, give them some time. But at the end of the day, most people you reach out to aren't necessarily going to respond, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that they're mad at you for reaching out or anything. Maybe they're busy, maybe they're not interested, fine. But Adam and I always have the mindset, it's like, what's the worst that's going to happen? They don't respond. You move to the next one. So that would be, I guess, a high level thoughts.
And I guess I'll tread lightly, but also just because if I were asking this question, Connor, great answer. I like kind of want like a rough number, So like, if you like reach out with like cold email intro and they don't respond, like you probably shouldn't, bug them. I wouldn't like follow up. But if they respond, you have a conversation and maybe they take a little bit to respond. I would get like, generally speaking, Connor, I'm sure you'd agree, like give them like a week. Give them like a week. If they don't respond in a week, then maybe like do a quick follow up and say, hey, we talked a week ago, blah, blah. But I feel like that's kind of the general rule. I don't know if you guys would both agree, Max and Connor, but about a week, I would say. So
yeah, I would agree. I think I give people 2 chances for me. You reach out to somebody, and if they don't respond, maybe you wait a week to reach out again. If they don't, then you have to move on to the next. There's a lot of people out there, and you come from a perspective. I totally agree. You don't ask for a job. It's usually a job you're reaching out. You don't ask for a job straight up because it puts them on the defensive, but you're asking for advice. You're trying to learn.
Right.
And that's the whole thing, and have a conversation. And most people want to talk about themselves, like what you said, Connor, which I totally agree.
Right.
can you speak a little bit? I mean, we talked a little bit about networking tips. Can you speak about, some examples you've had? I know there's some pretty legendary networking stories that I've heard offline between you two. Can you speak?
Oh yeah.
This is where you can name drop a little bit, and if you feel comfortable, just some stories of what you did, and then also maybe some like do's and don'ts and like lessons you've learned, and like things where it's like I messed up in this networking thing, and this is a great lesson. Now I always don't do this. I think that'd be really helpful for the audience.
Yeah. So I guess kind of starting off with the, part of my language, but like the holy shit moment was, I think we were juniors and we were working on a project. We were working on like a company. And again, with the same mindset of like, what's the worst that could happen? I reached out to Mark Cuban and literally, and just kind of with a brief pitch, I'd probably looked up on YouTube forums, like what's the best way to reach out to Mark Cuban? Like I put so much time to this. And I kid you not, I sent him an email. I think it was like 3 minutes later, he emails me back. And basically, long story short, he ended up not investing, but like we probably went back and forth for a couple hours. I mean, like 30, 40 emails. And I will never forget that. He asked really insightful questions and was very encouraging at the end, even though I said, hey, I think I'll pass. And that was obviously I literally left class. Sorry, I don't know if I should say that, but I literally left class to like get on the phone with Connor and be like, all these questions are coming in like from Mark Cuban, I got to answer these. And it was just a wild experience. So that was definitely one of the holy shit moments. This is wow. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's always a good one. And I would say one that I learned a lot from is, we grew up in Portland. We were always Blazers fans, big sports people. So, we decided, hey, we want to go sit courtside at a Blazer game. And at the time, this was over a year ago, and Adam was, the sports account wasn't nearly as big as it is now. And, we hadn't worked with that many big brands. But I was like, hey, that's the goal. And so I started reaching out, and it took months, and I probably reached out to 25 different people. But not in an annoying way. I'm not going at it like, hey, I want courtside tickets. How can I get that? I was going at it from, hey, we'd love to collab. Like, we're lifetime fans. Like, we'd love to work with you in any way. With the ultimate goal of courtside tickets. Well, took about 4 or 5 months, but eventually one of my emails got to the right person, and they were ecstatic. They were thrilled. They wanted to work together. We got to go sit courtside twice, actually. So it was one of those things where just because they don't respond, it doesn't mean they don't like you or they're not happy. Like, I just hadn't found the right person yet. I hadn't found the person that had any control over it or anything. And when I did, it was awesome. So that's always a fun one for me. It was months, but it worked out. So, you really got to spend time. And then I guess the only other piece of networking advice I have is words matter. And it sounds stupid, but Adam and I will sit and go back and forth on an email, even if it's 2 sentences. And if it's important, we'll spend an hour on it because it's important. And every single word in that email matters. How it's punctuated, how the email's laid out, what comes first, every part of it matters in how they're going to receive it. So you have to think from their mindset of, what are they thinking? What questions are they going to have, and answer them ahead of time? Just really thinking through, because I do most of the outreach and business development, and I spend at least an hour on every cold email. So
I think that's great advice. I mean, there's so many points you touched on, right? There's just general idea of you guys are both persistent and positive, and it doesn't matter if you have rejection. I think that's really important to be successful. Like, period, end of story. And then you also have the detail orientedness, where you're making sure that when you do have that shot and you're able to land with the right person, you're giving the best effort for it, and you put the time and work in. And I think that's really important lessons to people in the audience, that you only have one chance for a first impression, and you want to maximize it, and you want to just keep doing that with more people, and eventually you'll just get that yes. And I got to do that with the Blazer game, because I want to sit front seat. I mean, that sounds pretty cool. I have a couple questions from the audience. So from Ava, if you were to go back in time, would you all go in would you all go into TikTok after graduation, even if it's not at the point of sustaining, or would you get a job on the side? So knowing what you know now, how big TikTok is, you know, picturing yourself 2-3 years ago, would you have gone all into TikTok, or would you have done a regular job? I think that's generally
a great question. I guess, yeah, I feel I'm Connor. I'm curious to hear your answer. I probably would not have. I think it's, I mean, unless you, again, like if you have, like I said, that very, you know, supportive kind of friend, family group that you're able to do that with maybe, you know, little to no income, then absolutely. Yeah, I would say go for it. But, you know, coming out of college, like I didn't know, like TikTok, relatively speaking, was really new. And frankly, it was kind of, I think, on the brink of discussion of being banned too. So I was like, holy crap, this is actually, I was taking that into account too. But I would keep it as a side hustle until you're able to meet kind of your daily needs. Like if you have I guess kind of like identify your personal burn rate, like what are your expenses? Like if you're able to like fulfill those, then yeah, go full time. You know what I mean? Like if it's keep it low, whatever it is. But all things considered, I think I would have like kept going. I just would have transitioned into it full time earlier once I saw kind of the tipping point of like, all right, this is literally like exceeding my full-time job. And there's clearly something here. Now, that being said, I wouldn't go into that blind. Really, you know, you got to have like some structure, like you got to have a plan and a vision. Like what's the long game, right? Because like this is a whole nother discussion actually, but this is actually really important. And one thing that we as a business is part of our vision and theory is that you know, having, you know, like monetizing through ads and campaigns is great, but that's going to dry up. I'm going to say it right now, that is going to dry up. It's going to dry up for me. It's going to dry up for the creator next to me, 100%. So what you want to do is kind of have the Mr. Beast, Logan Paul, Emma Chamberlain model, where they're reverse engineering product market fit, right? They have the market, so feed them the products. What do they want? What maybe you have a defined community of automotive lovers. It's kind of lofty, but like, what if you created a car? You know, what if you like engineered a car and like sold them a car? Super bad example, but I think you get the point. It's like you want to have these businesses that sustain themselves if your content were to go away. That's exactly what the really, really knowledgeable creators are doing now. That was a bit of a tangent, but yeah, just my 2 cents there.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, that's a good question. I would say for me, definitely would not go into it straight out of college, because I think you need to, I would go into it if you're really passionate about it. I would go into it as a side hustle, and then also network and try and get a job in the industry, or try and get a job working at some marketing firm somewhere, or some social media hire. Even if you go out and do it yourself, go to a company that doesn't have a social media person and say, hey, pay me X amount and I'll run your social media. And it gives you a platform to get paid to help. And maybe you're not making millions, but if you're making enough to at least squeak by and you're learning something at the same time, I think that's great. So I would definitely try and get a job at the same time, but in the same industry. And then, yeah. And then the other thing I would say is it's hard to go out on your own if you don't have the right, kind of business in place. And that's something like Adam and I were able to go out on our own when we did, which was great. But, you know, neither of us could necessarily go out on our own as successfully alone, and because we didn't have all of the skill set. And so just making sure that you have not just the ability to create good videos, but you also have experience reaching out to brands. You have experience, you know, understanding how to talk to brands and how to create marketing campaigns and things like that, I think is important as well, or at least partnering with someone who else also is interested in it. So that would be my 2 cents, I guess, on that.
Yeah, I really, really quickly, I'd also just quickly add that although we're the only ones here, we're actually a team of 9. So 100%, there is absolutely no way we could have done this by ourselves, or me by myself early on. It definitely takes that team, to what Connor said, having those very specific skill sets to really help you grow into a business and sustain yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. And I think you touch on a lot of points, is that, you know, when you go into a corporate job, you're going to learn a lot of things, and it gives you that safety net because it's hard to be an entrepreneur, and most of the time it's not successful, for a lot of people. And if it isn't, you have that backup that okay, I've had a year, 2 years of work experience, I can go back to it. And then also with that work experience, you're really developing those skill sets that you use today. So I think that's excellent advice. I want to leave a little bit of time because we're starting to get questions coming in, so we'll wait a little bit till the end. But you just touched on, it is not just you two started, in this business. You have a team of 9, which is unbelievably impressive. Can you, I imagine, on the call, there's people who are like, all right, I like Connor and Adam. I would be really interested to get in contact with them and potentially intern, potentially work with them. I want to hand it off to you two and to talk about different opportunities with your company.
Yeah. So we have a full team. We have video editors, project managers. Funny enough, most of them happen to be Ducks, not on purpose necessarily, but again, the whole network thing kind of plays into that. And, we like working with Ducks, so there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, we're definitely looking for a lot of different positions. We're always hiring. We have a lot of demand on a lot of projects that, we're looking to get good people in. And for us, we don't hire based on, oh, I'm the best video editor in the world necessarily. It's more about having the hunger and the attitude that you're going to learn how to do it. You're going to be consistent and you're going to keep doing it. And that's what we're looking for. And if you come at it from that attitude, regardless of your hard skills, we would love to talk to you. We're currently looking for entry-level video editors, project managers, content writers. And like I said, anyone who wants to get into the social media industry, reach out. Get a LinkedIn if you don't have one already, definitely. And reach out and let's talk, because it's a good opportunity to get some experience working with big brands like Sports Illustrated and stuff right off the bat. So would love to chat.
Definitely.
Yes. And as Max said, there's a variety of positions in terms of internship, part-time, even looking into full-time, all open, all available. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I was at just a side tangent, I was at a networking event yesterday and I'm telling people to reach out and they didn't. So when Adam and Connor say reach out, feel free to reach out. There's going to be like a LinkedIn, their emails we'll add. So, if you're really interested in or just want to have a conversation, reach out for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're now about, 15 minutes or so. I want to open it up for kind of live questions and going through. So I really appreciate Adam and Connor going through all the set questions. So we have one that's been waiting here for a bit. So I appreciate Ryan for waiting. And I'm going to preference this question that you can feel comfortable with how much you want to divulge. But Ryan is asking, can you share the story of how much you make money basically? And when you were smaller, was it like something like you got $100 here or $200 there? And when did you get to the point of maybe like a big project? You may not have to obviously talk about the amount you made, where you were like, okay, this is different. All right, maybe we can actually start a business about this.
Yeah. I'll give actually 2 examples. And they're different, and that's purposeful. One is through was actually through TikTok. And like Connor said, monetization is tricky. It takes a long time to be able to monetize, especially through platforms like YouTube, TikTok. But yeah, I was like I got into the TikTok Creator Fund, which if you don't know, that's kind of how TikTok incentivizes its creators to keep creating content. They basically pay out in aggregate based off of views per month. And so yeah, I got in, and the first couple months were like, to your point, I think it was named Ryan. It was like $100 or whatever. And then I think it was like the 3rd or 4th month, I was like, whoa, I mean, this is like pretty substantial. And so that was a big eye opener of like, wow, okay, it just kind of takes time and consistency to really see those returns. And I guess going one level deeper is like really identifying what worked for my audience and then doubling down on that. Like, okay, this style of content works really well, maximize viewership. And that then, in turn provided a good, ROI. And then one other example was, which I kind of actually mentioned on a little bit earlier, was the Sports Illustrated one, when they just kind of reached out and said, hey, here's this opportunity. You can do X, Y, Z, or you can just do X, but there was kind of a almost like a menu of things that they wanted to do. And I was like, wow, I mean, this is what that pays. Like I can actually do that. That's crazy. So yeah, I would say definitely those two were kind of the highlights. And Connor, I don't know if you have any other examples.
Yeah, I think those are main ways that you start monetizing early on. But I think the key that a lot of people don't realize is you can be creative with it and you can be smart with it in terms of if a brand reaches out, and you'd be surprised, a brand will reach out and they'll say, hey, well, we can do one video for X amount. And if you go back and say, hey, look, in my past experience, 3 to 5 videos does better. I'll offer you a discount per video, but let's do 3 to 5. And then you're making more money. It's less per video, but then you start getting a consistent basis. Or you go to the same brand and they're trying to promote you and you say, hey, I can also create content for your channel. I'm sure you need that. So pay me less per video again, but I can make content. So just ways, that's how we really got started being able to get off on our own, is expanding those relationships, meeting people who already clearly liked the content, and then finding ways to turn that into larger sums of money. Consistently.
Yeah, be savvy.
Yes.
I think that's excellent advice. I learned something there. That was excellent. We have another question from the audience. So Connor, you mentioned throughout the presentation that it's 24/7. It takes a lot of time. And, for a lot of people, they may not want that, right? Like that's a lot of time, a lot of effort, unless you're really passionate about it. William asks, what do you do to recharge, your battery and get back into the day-to-day? I know you have unlimited, in theory, right? You have unlimited time off, but you can't take too much time off, right? So, what do you guys do to recharge? And then also he's asking, in New York, where's your base location as well for the business?
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, we recharge slightly differently probably, but I would just say overall, it's important to, when you're recharging, to just turn it off completely, I guess. And it's easy because the notifications are nonstop. So, if you're able to turn it off completely, step away, even if you're watching a movie, if you go out to dinner, whatever it is, just make sure you turn on Do Not Disturb for an hour or two and let your brain recharge, I would say would be the biggest thing to me, regardless. And then just insert whatever your favorite activity is, but just making sure you turn it off so it's actually free time.
Yeah, I would just say that, with kind of having the freedom of entrepreneurship, there is that ability to like, hey, if you need an hour nap, like you can do that, but yeah, I mean, I go to the gym every day, like literally after this call, I'm gonna go hit the gym. And that helps a lot. And I just turn it off, listen to music. It's kind of my place. I'm really kind of in the zone there. And then I really enjoy walks. I'm sure Connor, you do too. We walk sometimes, but yeah, like on last Sunday, I walked 11 miles in the city and just listened to music the whole time. It was like 2.5 hours. It was great. And of course, and New York City is amazing. It was a beautiful day. And there's just so much to look at and kind of, take into account, and you're just not bombarded with, you turn the notifications off and stuff like that and just kind of zone out. It's great. So
yeah, and I would even say one other thing is making sure you continue projects that you're excited about.
definitely.
And I think that's just as recharging for us, because then I know that there's always when you're not working, you feel like you should be kind of a thing, but if you're focused on something you're passionate about, you're still working, so you feel good about it. But, it's just fun for us. We'll just sit down, last night we were up till who knows how late, just chatting about things we were excited about and just going through ideas of content that would be fun to make, not necessarily makes money, but yeah, so just staying excited about it is important. Yeah.
I think that's
and in terms of in New York, we're on 55th and 2nd Avenue. So yeah.
Kind of near the beginning of Central Park, sort of. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, but I think that's a great point, going back to just managing burnout. It's different for different people, but you got to have it because you can't work 24/7, even though everyone wants to. So, for everyone in the audience, we have roughly about 6 minutes. Come in with questions. I have a couple more too, if there isn't any. I would love to know too, talked about these big successes, about managing these big brand relationships and building them up. you have any tips about how did you manage big brand relationships? Did you get advice from like other, entrepreneurs? Because, that must be really intimidating at a point, maybe you have imposter syndrome, maybe you don't, of just like, you're talking to Sports Illustrated. I mean, that's Sports Illustrated. So it's like, how did you manage that relationship, and what was advice that you did, for that?
Yeah, Connor, I'm sure you have plenty to say here. I'll just quickly touch on, you almost like, don't get me wrong, you're like super excited at first, but then it's kind of like, you just really like focus in on like, what is the ask? What's the task at hand? And have fun with it. You almost like disassociate. Because along with Sports Illustrated, we worked with Porsche and, ESPN and Snickers and just these big brands. And it's just kind of like, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, what's the objective? And like, how can we have fun with that objective? And then really, it's just, you're working with people. It's like they're just excited as you are to like figure out something super creative and exciting. I think that's the beauty of being content creation. So, Connor.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was fortunate out of college. Like I mentioned, I worked at a high-end marketing firm. So we worked with big clients all the time. So that gave me a little bit of insight into that, which was super helpful. But even outside of that, what Adam said is really the key. It's not a brand. You're not talking to Sports Illustrated. You're just talking to, whoever you're talking to, Kev, Ryan, whoever it is over there that is your point of contact, and they're the same. And we've developed great friendships with the people at SI that expands into more business. So just really focusing on them as a person and wanting to get to know them and stuff like that. It makes the work side really easy.
At the end of the day, they're just people like you, and that goes for creators too. I mean, we've got some friends that are creators that have many more, like tens of millions of followers that we talk on a regular basis, and some are tricky to work with, but most are just people, and they just want to be treated as people too. So
Yep.
It's really good advice. Yeah, I think that's that, you build up that brand in your head and it can be so intimidating, but when you realize they're just people, that's all that matters. Another quick question too, if you're thinking about someone in the audience that's like, all right, I want to replicate this or try to do something like Adam and Connor or join them, can we talk about like, how do you guys come up with ideas? What is the, where's the passion and that brainstorming, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, obviously, but like, how do you keep, thinking about new ideas so you keep that creation engine going?
That is such a good question. I sometimes like, it's a kind of a multitude of, there's no like one answer to this, it's like, sometimes like I said, when I'm going on a walk, maybe like I pass by something and it'll like spark an idea. Or as weird as it may sound, my place of like ideation is the shower. And I'll just like think so hard in the shower, and probably hurts our water bill, but it's worth it. And, and then, even just like talking with Connor, like, for example, the Rich Paul video, that has almost 1 million views on TikTok and a bunch more on Instagram and YouTube. And Connor came up with that. I didn't even think of that. I was like, I don't even know who LeBron's agent is. He's like, LeBron's agent has a great story. I'm like, who the hell's that? So I just really talking to people. And then when you're like so passionate, like we are, about these certain segments and spaces, sports, automotive, you name it, you're kind of immersed in the industry. And so like, you really see things that may arise and might see them in a different light, or might be like, hey, I can kind of mold this current event announcement into like a different idea. It's really hard to explain, but like ideas just come from everywhere. And I just really think that, from the creative, just from being a creative standpoint, it's like, that's the point of a creative. You're always like open-minded. And so just to always be open-minded, and whether it's Connor who's finances, whether it's me in the shower, like just always be open to your own ideas and others' ideas.
It's great advice.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So we have a couple more questions kind of piling in. Maybe we do like, quicker answers. Ava's asked, do you find scrolling on TikTok as something that inspires your content or makes you less creative? If you guys do that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay. Relatively speaking, Connor is going to be like, no, you do scroll through TikTok, but I feel like relatively speaking, like I definitely, like the ratio is probably about 80-20 of me creating and then actually like consuming and scrolling. I really don't like scroll that much. And frankly, it's because we just produce so much that it's like, it's just a lot, And don't get me wrong, there's things actually on Instagram Reels too, or YouTube Shorts, where I might be like, oh, and to your point, it's like, oh, I could like this video was in the fashion space. I could do this same concept that they did and do it in the sports space. I'm sure it would do really well. So absolutely. And even other like creators that are in your space, it's like, oh, they did that announcement of LeBron James, I don't know, retiring. Like maybe I can spin it off differently and do a skit or do something. So yeah, absolutely. I although I don't scroll a lot, when I do, it's like, okay, here's a little golden nugget that I could like take and like, use for myself. Definitely.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person too. I personally don't ever scroll TikTok really, or any sort of social media channels, because that's just not where I get my inspiration. But I think that, yeah, if it inspires you, great. If it doesn't, there's so many other ways to figure it out. I would just say be careful not to fall down the black hole of scrolling, and then an hour goes by, and then it's like, yeah, you have to make the content. So yeah, I think it depends on the person for sure. Because I really don't look at TikTok ever.
Yeah, the algorithm knows you better than you do.
Yeah, that's why I don't have one. I was on it too long and I deleted it. We're almost at time, and I just want to say thank you so much to Connor and Adam. It's New York time right now, so they're staying up late for us. I think, and I also just FYI to the audience, there's a lot of questions that we didn't prepare, and it was a lot of ad hoc, and they just answered them on the spot, and I really appreciate them to going through this. Before I had a question about, TikTok handle, we'll put all the information for Connor and Adam and how to reach them. And if you're interested in joining their company or just trying to talk to them, definitely recommend it. Again, thank you so much for joining and being so transparent and honest with your answers. I learned a lot. There's going to be a recording of this online that I think is on the UOA site, and we'll find a link to make sure everyone gets it. But again, thank you so much for the time, you two, and really appreciate and continued success.
Yes,
thank you
so much for having us.
Yeah,
really
Awesome,
great
guys.
chatting with you.
Thanks, everyone. All right, thank you for joining. Take care.
see you guys.
Bye.